We all have that one friend, the one who says exactly what's on their mind, no matter what. And that's Sheetal Mars.
That's right. Every week, my friends and I dive into whatever's on my mind: sports, politics, pop culture, even my own struggles, you name it. If I'm thinking about it, we're talking about it.
Unfiltered, unapologetic, and just a little dangerous. Get ready for the wild ride that is Sheetal Weapon. You've been warned.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Sheetal Weapon. I don't know how you found us, but I'm glad you did. I'm Lethal Sheetal. If you're missing Biggie Trog, which is my brother, for my guests, yes, I have guests, plural, on today's show. He is off today, which leaves me with three wonderful women. We have a very special show today. I have Martha Jaffet's, Carla Kanan, and Janine Brown, who are board member extraordinaires of a wonderful non-for-profit called Empower Her Too. Their mission is the empowerment of women and girls in all sorts of fields, including finance, mental health, technology, leadership, and all sorts of other programs. And they have done a wonderful job of impacting many young women's lives and giving them the strength and courage to move forward with confidence in their careers. And so I'd like to welcome all these women to this show. Hi, everybody.
Hi.
Hello.
So happy to be here. Thank you for having us.
I'm so excited I have you guys. We actually all got together as a board not that long ago, and we were doing some training, and the topic got brought up of, okay, it's all well and good that we have this mission and we're proud of our mission, we're sticking to it, but the paradigm in which Empowered Her Too exists has changed. The world is turning against DEI initiatives, of which, Empower Her Too benefits. And we're thinking this is like the elephant in the room, not just of our nonprofit, but of nonprofits across America, across North America, and companies. So even for our girls going out and looking for jobs, how does this impact them? And so I wanted to get us all together and talk about this shift. And I was wondering if any one of you want to talk about a little bit of how did we get here? First let's define DEI. What is DEI?
I can take that one. So DI were initiatives developed to address historical disparities, right? We had all these challenges socially, and the idea was to create equal opportunities, especially for those marginalized communities. That was the concept, that was the idea. And then the corporate world adapted and prioritized DEI to follow those social justice movements. Think about all the way started from the 60s and so on. Also the demographic shifts, because you start getting a lot of demographic changes in what America is defined as. And then also all the research that was happening showing that these diverse teams drove better outcomes because they will bring diverse perspectives. But it's important to highlight that DEI is not just race and gender, although it plays a part on it. It also encompasses accessibility. So when we think about people that have some sort of disability or challenge, socioeconomic backgrounds, neurodiversity, and also creating those inclusive environments for everyone. And it's important to highlight that, because when people think this is just about minorities, they are missing that they themselves could be affected, right? Anything from veteran rights to anybody that has a disability, to if you want to have maternity, paternity leave, etc. So the goal is not to have just representation, but also to foster a sense of belonging, where these diverse voices are going to contribute to decision making.
I love it. Thank you, Carla. I would like to add a couple of things. So first of all, this movement, at least at the corporate level, it started as D&I. And over time, so it was diversity and inclusion, right? And over time, because of everything that Carla said, well, there was a lot of questions around equity and how is the movement helping with equity. So the E was added to the DE and I. And then finally, the B got into place. So DEIB is what it ended up being. So it was
What is B?
belonging.
I've actually never.
belonging.
Oh, belonging. I've actually not heard that.
So it was it was a progress, because as much as we learned about what's happening and how it's impacting, not only the engagement and the morale, but mostly the results. Companies shifted to that, and it's interesting because this is what research shows. Companies that have diversity included in their boards, in their C-suite, and overall, they actually earn more money. They're more profitable. So companies are not just doing it because it's a nice thing to do, but because they're getting more money. So it's easy to justify. Why do we have, or why do we need a diverse population? And I agree that many or most of the organizations I work with focus diversity on race and gender. There's so much more around diversity that sometimes gets lost in translation.
So I'll add a little bit of what I saw is one that it kind of blew up about 10 years ago, where maybe it was 15 years ago now, where this conversation started showing up because people were speaking with their wallets. They were choosing companies that had more diversity. They were choosing products that answered to that diversity. One of the things that I saw with a lot of companies that wanted to publicize their DEI efforts was because it opened markets, right? You when you cater to a certain demographic and you have what seems to be a homogenous way of thinking, you actually close your doors to a lot of markets. And there's a lot of buying power across diverse um, socioeconomic, gender, racial, and sexual orientation statuses. All these labels have money, and you want to attract customers. You don't want to attract one group of customers because you can saturate a market. I think of Target when I'm saying stuff like this, is these even big box stores who opened up their shade ranges in their makeup aisles, who opened up, diversity in their clothing sizes, who opened up, various ways of bringing in people who had eyesight issues or had mobility issues into their stores. All these people were buying products through other companies. And so DEI actually opened up all these markets for them. And in that, to what Martha was saying, actually made them more profitable. So if having DEI makes you more profitable, why would we ever turn away from it? Why would we be even in this conversation right now where DEI is almost a slur on a company and you see so many backing away from it?
Well, I think that the backing away is more of the zeitgeist, right? It's the feeling of the moment, and it's is carrying a lot of uh, probably we went too far in so many things, like too fast. The change happened too fast, and then it created an adverse reaction to those that were not used or not as comfortable with it. That openness, that multitude of changes, and the reaction that people have to change is always fear. It's natural. Anytime we introduce change to anything we do, it elicits fear. And then in return, people look for returning to what they consider normal or what they consider to be the traditional. So these look for the traditional values of a society that is no longer traditional, is colliding with the changes that were happening. So I think that that force that is happening between the change, the societal change with the appetite to returning to the traditional values is what is eliciting this response. Now, is the majority feeling that way? I mean, the way that it is shifting so fast would tell you that it does, but I think it's also, I would say it's not just that. I think it's also a response to the political changes that we're seeing. And sometimes companies are going to align themselves with the new regimen because that's normal, right? That's where you get your funding, that's where you get support, that's where you get a lot of the resources that you need to continue growing as an organization. So while that is unfortunate,
I'm going to
sometimes
even tap onto that
they
and
will do
say this
that,
as far as
for the sake of the stakeholders,
as we
as we
see, a
call
lot
it
of
in
women are kind
corporate
of
world.
taking over the reins of businesses, and they're becoming the most educated and things like that. This kind of goes into Empower Her too, where I think a lot of it is a little bit of a fair on the company side, where it's like, okay, now we have these successful women and things that are happening in the world, and a lot of times people think it also goes back to race, right? A lot of people don't understand what DEI even is, right? People think it's, oh, this person that's of this race and they're just getting promoted, or we're giving them these things because they're at a disadvantage, right? But that's not what it is. So I would go to even say it's as far as not wanting these people to be in certain places too, potentially. And that could also not, that is actually not a good thing, because these are the people that are starting to become more educated. These are the people who are willing to actually do the work, to do the things to get to where they need to be in that role.
Yeah, I think we see too that we're seeing more women occupying seats in master's programs. That predominantly women and people of color are the ones graduating from master's programs, becoming more educated. I want to add something here that I think is a primary misconception, and I've been, and I don't want to say a victim of this because I'm not a victim. I do just fine. If anybody's listening, I do just fine. But it's the idea that for someone who looks like me, female, person of color, let's say if I was gay or even transgender or any one of these others that we can put a label on. If I walk into a job interview, there's no way that I could be more qualified than even my male counterparts vying for the same job, or even take it a step further, the white male counterparts vying for that job. It's impossible. So for a company to have hired me, the only reason they would have done so is to fill some sort of quota. That DEI is about saying, ignoring qualifications, ignoring merit, and saying, well, because, you know, wokeness or whatever, diminutive we want to apply to it, because that's what woke has become, is almost a slur as well, is saying, I need to choose an avatar so that I can say that I have diversity here. So I think in some people's minds, when they see someone who's of an ethnic background or some different background than themselves, that the only reason that person occupies that seat is some manager answering to some quota literally plucked them off the street with no qualifications whatsoever and put them in that chair and said, okay, I've checked off my box. And I I want to say I take umbrage to that, for me as an educated woman, because I know I can run circles around anybody in my job. And I think a lot of the women sitting on this call would say the same thing, that they're absolutely qualified for the seats that they occupy and the careers that they have. They play second fiddle to no one, and there's no, what they would credit their success to is other people recognizing that success and merit and qualifications can come in a feminine package, can come in a darker package, can come in a wheelchair package. It can come in any of those packages, and that can make people uncomfortable that, oh, the person sitting next to me who doesn't look like me and isn't like me can be just as qualified as me
Or better.
or better.
I I think it's all rooted in fear, and I'm gonna go a little bit deeper. We still live in a white male world, and even though the policies have advanced, at least in this country, and in other countries around the world, the reality is that the world is run primarily by white males. So anyone that is different than that creates the sense of fear and unfairness. And so now we might be looking at the other way around. So now I don't have opportunities as a white male because there is a shift, right? And that creates fear. So in order for us to be equal again, apparently, and I'm just being sarcastic here, we have to go back to where we were before. But we're not there anymore. So now we're having a very deep conflict from a societal perspective, from an educational perspective, because thanks to the diversity and inclusion strategies and programs, we've created opportunities for people that are not white males. So now how do we deal with all this? Now, I also need to say, and this might be a bit controversial, as everything in life, as we go into a new paradigm, well, we have to push a little bit boundaries. And I would say some organizations, some institutions went a little bit too far in terms of diversity and inclusion. And that's why I think these are the instances in which people have the opportunity to say, well, I'm being discriminated because I am not a minority and I am not disabled and I don't have all those. So how do we find a good balance between where we are and where we want to be or need to be? Because as Carla said before, the world has changed. So we need to be able to bring in and give access to people all over the world and all over the spectrum and all over, physical, mental, perspective characteristics. So how do we do that? But everybody's scared right now, both sides.
And I will add to that, Marta, that right now the discourse is that DEI is unnecessary because people claim that meritocracy alone should drive success. But the challenge is that it's not about who you bring, is that we're ignoring those systematic barriers for those people to succeed. So if you have these systematic barriers that are preventing you from growing, where does meritocracy comes in? It's impossible. So the narrative today is shifting from DI for embracing it to questioning whether it's fair or whether it is neutral, and whether it has taken opportunities from those that already have them and that do not have to get challenged by what the system does to them. So this scaling back that we're seeing, like I said, is due to that political pressure we're seeing and the downturns. But I think that it's a very difficult time. I'm also a minority, just like Sheetal. And on top of that, I immigrated to this country years ago. So you see this very big shift where we got to a point where we were embracing it, when we were not considering ourselves just a diversity hire, where it had become fair, and you didn't see that as an obstacle or that you were just a token, but you were actually seeing that merit of your work shining through. And I'm wondering how that is going to change now, especially if you're just starting your career or trying to enter the workforce.
Yeah, I remember something my older brother used to tell me, because when I was growing up, this girl bossing close to the sun is a very millennial attitude. And the idea for my mother, who grew up in India, who wasn't allowed to be a doctor, that being a doctor is a very Indian thing to do. It's a very cliche thing, but it's very real for us in our community, the pressure to excel in especially prestige driven fields. And for my mother in the 70s in India, she was not allowed by her family to become a doctor, which is what she wanted to be. She couldn't leave home to go do that. They come to the United States. Here, she has the ability to go, and she's got 2 PhDs, 2 masters. My mother is extraordinarily brilliant woman. And here she could do that. She could not do that in India. And then her hope for me was that I would excel her ambition. I would go past what she could accomplish, the limitations of what she had. And I found myself in mid 90s, and I was talking to my older brother. I said, in the world in which we live, TV is mostly white people who I love. I love Friends. This is not a knock on anybody, because I grew up in that culture. I grew up here in America. And for a long time, I wanted to be white. It was really unfortunate that I wasn't. But I would say to him, it doesn't matter how many A's I get. It doesn't matter how many masters I get. It doesn't matter how many PhDs I get. It doesn't matter how good I am at my job. Doesn't matter if I work 16-hour days. It doesn't matter. When I step into that room, all 5'2" of me, and I'm surrounded by men, white men with okay grades. Maybe they have a master's, maybe they don't. Maybe they have a referral, maybe they don't. I'm never going to get chosen. This is what I was telling him. I'm just not going to get chosen. It doesn't matter how good I do. It doesn't matter how many certificates I have. And he said, why are you aiming to have just as good or a little bit better than your male counterpart? When you walk in the room, you make it undeniable that you're the best. So good you can't be ignored. And I took that to heart, and it's to me, it's a good and a bad thing that I have to do 3, 4, 5 times better than my competition, so that it is so undeniable that I'm that good to be chosen. But that's what I've realized I had to do. And it is absolutely true. When I walk into the room, I have to be 5 times better than my competition just to get the interview.
You're talking about two different things. The first one has to do with what's the story or the narrative you tell yourself, right? The second one is clearly, as a woman, as a woman of color, well, we have to do more and be more, because if not, we get unnoticed. But I think you just said something that is so important for us as women, as moms, and in light of the work we do with girls and young women at Empower 2, is how do we ensure that women and minorities in general have the mindset to tell themselves that it is possible, I can do it, I am good enough, so that then the hard work can happen. Because what I've seen, unfortunately, many times is that the self narratives is around, I'm not sure I'm going to make it. So in your case, Sheetal, you had your brother just pushing you and say, well, why not? Right? So that's the, I think, one of the most important pieces of work that we need to do to help others believe that they have the same abilities, they have the same merits, they have the same possibilities, and then do the hard work.
I actually think that's great. Go ahead, Carla.
Yeah, I completely agree with Martha, because every day you have a choice on what role you want to play in your own story, I suppose. And I think using that narrative that you tell yourself, whether you're going to play a victim of what society is doing versus deciding to just excel or every day push yourself farther. Now, I'm not saying that I'm going to completely omit what is happening, because what is happening is very real. But
Absolutely.
I have to choose what I'm doing every day. And I can only do this if I have two things: that I have the strength in my convictions and my skills. And the second one, if I have allies in my life. And I think That's two things that we do, especially for our organization, for Empower Her to, is to give them the skills and the confidence that they need, these young women, but also to have allies. And some allies is us, with mentorship programs, and sometimes it's allies that people give you. But look, it's not easy. Like I said, when I came into the country many years ago, I'm not going to say how many because I'm going to age myself. um, but when I came here, it was about finding that allyship. When you don't know how you fit into a new society, when you don't look like everybody else, but you also don't look. It's not like no one looked like me. It's just I didn't look like the majority, and finding those allies, finding that community, finding that I could also have a part in my story by learning, by educating, by committing every day to improving myself in the way I spoke, in the way I, sometimes even how you pronounce words, and being accepting to that, it really played a role. And as I grew in my career, and I use this example because I think a lot of uh, young women that are entering the workforce, one thing that I did was not think of myself as today I'm a woman, I am a minority, and I just went in and I was like, I'm an employee or I am a manager. I was, the role I wanted to play was one where I usually forgot until something will happen that reminded me, whether it was a bad interaction or something, that, oh, I forgot about me being represented as this. But as long as I didn't represent myself as that, and I just led with my skill set and led with uh, my push to excel every day, I was fine with it, and it carried me throughout my career.
I actually really love that, and I say something similar. I forget who I am. And someone asked me, "What gave you the confidence to do this and that?" And I said, honestly, I'd like to say it was preparation, that I worked hard, I studied hard, but most of it was I walked in the room and forgot who I was. It didn't matter what I looked like. I didn't think about it. I didn't think that I was in the female package. I didn't think about that I didn't look like the person interviewed. It didn't occur to me.
Yeah. It's
And
it's
if we can do
absolutely
that.
mindset. I too came to this country many years ago, and I remember I've always been, strong, very vocal, but I remember I was not talking that much because I decided to tell myself that my accent was a disadvantage to me. So I look white. So, if I don't talk, you would probably not know that I'm not from here. So I spent many months not giving my opinion, not participating as much because I thought that my accent was not good enough to have a conversation until, I discovered that it actually was the one thing that made me unique, that brought perspective. And it's also a great opportunity because people ask you, where are you from, right? Because, you are different. So, I felt that shifted my entire career because I was courageous enough to speak, even though my accent was not perfect, right? Um, and I'm just, the accent is so easy to explain. Today, I work with many people, especially women executives, and I cannot tell you how many of those stories. It's not necessarily about the accent, but it's about the stories that we tell ourselves that prevent us from being at our best, and how shifting that story actually gives you the opportunity to forget who you are or how different you might look or sound because you're that good.
Yeah.
You're that good.
Yeah.
So, again, that doesn't change the reality in which we're living, but I'm saying there are things that we can do. And there are policies that we can influence within the organizations that we work, etc. So let's focus on the things that we can do.
Yeah.
Because if we only focus on the mandates from the government or on the policies, well, it might become very frustrating.
So I love where this conversation is going because I'm so glad you guys are so open. Um, the reason I brought up that story for me, and now that you guys have shared your stories, is one, it's so easy to get cynical. You hear the rhetoric out in the news, you hear,
Yeah.
the backlash, and I know so many women now have weird stories of being, confronted in the workplace, and people are being confronted in the workplace like as if they didn't earn their job and didn't earn their spot. Um, that you can get cynical because there's this, you know, what's going on politically, what's going on economically. We can get cynical and we can get in our heads and tell ourselves a narrative that nothing we do matters. Why should I even try? And it's funny because the group of us grew up in the world where that was the norm. We didn't see that, and we all made a choice to try anyway. And I think it's worked out for each one of us, but I also thought it was nice for especially young women and the women we serve through Empower Her too, and all so many other nonprofits that work for women and girls, to hear successful women had to fight through these things too. We all didn't wake up and go, I woke up like this, give me a job, and we got it. We all had to fight for our
And
spots.
and it's also, and Carla mentioned it before, it's also about the system, the support system, the allyship that you get in your life and your work. So if my husband would have said to me, "You're never going to make it," I probably wouldn't have, right? If my boss, who obviously was a white male, wouldn't have supported me, I mean, I'm talking about many years ago, well, probably I would not have believed in me as much. So it is a lot about the mindset that we have, and it's also about the people around us that support us and help us believe in ourselves. And unfortunately, there's a lot of people out there that are not allies, that they don't care. So if that's the case of any of you listening to this podcast, find someone else.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, look, I was very lucky. I am the oldest of three, and my dad always treated me like, I wouldn't say like one of the boys, but he never treated me like I was a girl that couldn't achieve things or couldn't. He pushed me just as hard as he pushed the rest of us, and so my dad is a very strong figure in my life because he calls himself the advisor of my life, which I think is very important. I find it very cute nowadays to have someone like that in your life. And I understand that some people might not have a great relationship with your parents, and that's uncontrollable, but do find someone that pushes you to be your best, someone that believes in you. Believing in you, I think, is the most important thing, because you have to believe in yourself, but you also have other people that can believe in you, and that could be your family, that could be a friend, that could be someone at work. Look, one of the biggest shifts I did in my career was because one of my former jobs had a mentorship program, and this person became my mentor. He was a hotel manager, and I have to say that his support and his honesty and his transparency of what I could achieve is what led me to make additional changes in my life. And sometimes you need those people that push you and they become allies. So while everything else seems very grim, and we're seeing all of these initiatives go out, and this is not happening, or we're going to encounter these challenges, I have a firm belief that there are pockets of allies out there that will continue to push for us. And if not, we can push within even this group. We continue to push ourselves and the girls in the program. So it's such a valuable force right now to have, like, continue to empower those that are allies. So in return, they empower those generations that are coming up.
I also feel that this generation, millennials and Gen Zs, are also have a different mindset, to whether they might not see as much difference between male and female, you know, straight or not. I mean, they don't, they are more diverse. They grew up in a world that is more diverse. So I think that over time we might get closer to, you know, from a policy perspective, from a government perspective, we might get there. So my challenge, or our challenge today, is how do we work in these two fronts? First, make sure that we provide the girls with the support, mental, emotional, psychological, physical support, so that we help them believe in themselves. And I'm talking about the girls because of the organization, but I'm talking about all minorities and all, you know, um, and all the different groups, the disadvantaged groups. Um, and also, how can we make shifts in the organizations in which we work for or with? So, how can we influence policies as well? We might not be able to influence the government, but there are some things we can do. So I'm not trying to cover the sun with one finger. I'm just trying to say we can focus on the things that we can control, or we can focus on the ones that we can.
Right.
I choose to focus on what I can control, or semi control.
At
What I
least
can influence,
influence,
I
right?
suppose.
Yeah, at least influence, and that's what Carla's saying. I find, one, Carla, it's so nice that you said that about. I call them champions, right? When we're calling them allies too, and each of us have benefited greatly from someone recognizing talent when they see it, and we like to pride ourselves on recognizing talent when we see it, in whatever package that comes in, and pulling people up. And I want anybody listening that there are still champions out there, even if they get rid of every DEI budget, if you get rid of all of those initiatives, a lot of people got a lot of opportunity that still work at those organizations and still know how to recognize talent when they see it. And they either are champions now or can be made to be champions just by seeing the benefit of what diversity does for their teams and for their productivity and for their bottom lines.
And I think many, if not most, managers and leaders have already seen that. They've experienced that. So with or without programs, they know, they've experienced how different and better having diversity of ideas, um, impacts the organization. Organizations that have diverse management teams reported 19% higher revenues due to innovation. So this is about making more money, having better results. So for those leaders and managers that have seen those results, they're going to continue looking to bring people into their teams and the organizations that will complement and diversify the way of thinking, so that they do better, they get better.
Yeah.
I would say, and I'm going to throw this out there because I know I have, my husband is white, and my producer on this show is a white male. Wonderful people. Let's be very clear. This is, when we're talking about DEI, it's not about saying that if you're in other group, you're better. Nobody's talking about relativism of who's better than whom just by what you can see skin deep, right? And what I would say to those groups, and I say this often to my son, is that the world doesn't have to be a zero-sum game. That what's better for me necessitates it being worse for you. And I would hope that through the work that we do of helping women and girls, that that benefits also men and boys. That empowered women lead to empowered men, empowered girls lead to empowered boys, and vice versa. And it doesn't have to be me versus you. It doesn't, it was the idea of when we were talking about boards, and they were saying there was an initiative to have diversity on boards. And I remember women saying, okay, but I don't want the one woman spot on the board seat. We can actually add more chairs to the table. It doesn't have to be you losing your spot. It's just adding me to this. And I think that's some of this. I'm hoping that corporate wise, if we can figure out that what betters me also betters them, then we would have more
Yeah.
champions and allies.
I could not agree more with that statement. I was looking for a book. If you haven't read it, The Infinite Game talks exactly about that. The more we think about our organization and our business to be winning so that someone else needs to lose, then we have a very limited opportunity. Now, when the pie grows, when everybody consumes more of whatever it is that I have or that I sell, well, then we grow the pie. We put more chairs, as opposed to it's binary. It's you win and I lose, or vice versa. So we can all win. Is how do we make that happen? Are we all winning the same? Probably not. Are we all improving, progressing? Absolutely. I love it.
Yeah. And Marta, you were talking about how organizations will keep on that, even if the programs are rebranded to something else, right? Because it's likely that, well, you cannot call it DEI, but you might call it something else. But one thing that for me continues to stick out is that when organizations make commitments to these type of initiatives, they're going to see that also a stronger employee engagement and retention. So it's not just that they'll do better financially, but that their workforce will be retained, and that means retaining talent, because you demonstrate that that inclusion is not just a nice to have, but it's a business imperative. When you bring diverse voices into the equation, you also bring diverse perspectives. In my experience, when I have been part of a team where everybody just says yes to everything that somebody else is thinking, you are going to stagnate innovation and growth, because if you don't challenge the status quo, and I don't mean that in a way that creates conflict, but if you don't challenge the status quo, then you constantly are going to arrive at the same result. But when you bring different perspectives, whether it might be different backgrounds, different, whether it's genders, societal, economic, when you bring those different backgrounds in that perspective, is when you are going to see shifts. Because at the end of the day, organizations are responding to customers, and those customers are not a one size fits all. They are diverse. So if your customers are diverse, how can you not have diversity into your perspective that is shaping your offering? I think
And
we have gone extreme, but we'll come back. Sorry, go ahead, Marta.
oh no, and I agree. I think our consumers and customers have become a lot more, I would say, intentional in terms of which companies am I going to invest or put my money or get their products in. So because they are diverse, and because they identify with companies that are doing the right thing, well, it's happening. And I agree with you. This is a balancing act. So we go one way, and then we have to shift to the whole other side of the pendulum, so that we then find the right balance for us. But in this process, there's a lot of pain for a lot of people. So how can we do our part in helping others go through this painful process? And we don't know how long will it take.
And you mentioned Gen Z being different in the way they act. And if you are on Threads or TikTok or one of those platforms, you'll see that they're very quick to organize themselves in their own perspective. They very quickly align with whether they want to go with a brand because they find it fair or unfair or align with their principles. So they hold closer their values in the way that they behave as consumers. And that is very interesting. Few brands have adapted that quickly to how they think and how they purchase. I mean, they're going to be the next big workforce, but also the big next buyer. and seeing that, I think that it's in that generation that we're gonna see probably a shift to that happy medium, if you may, because it's going, it has gone, it's going so far one side to the other,
Yeah.
that I think that it might be put down. That doesn't mean that we don't take a part on that, because after all, we have to support the generation. But I do feel that they will have a lot of socioeconomic impact as organizations think how they perform.
And I think that especially the younger generations do realize that they can speak with their pockets,
Yes.
which was not necessarily what happened before, because of the limited amount of companies that there were, or because of the limited knowledge. Right now, people understand that their pockets have power.
Yes.
And I think that pretty soon we're going to start seeing shifts in that sense of companies that, especially younger generations, um, are starting to support or not.
Yeah, I would say that too. It's important to remember companies are not people, and they have no moral compass.
Mm-hmm.
No matter what their mission statements or value statements, whatever they put on, their websites as their impact statements and whatever it is, I usually don't put any faith into them whatsoever, because companies are not people. People are people, and companies follow money. And part of some of this backlash that I've seen is that, over the last 4 years, we saw that people who feel uncomfortable with a world that has changed or is changing too fast around them spoke with their pockets, right? They initiated boycotts. They didn't want to see products that made them uncomfortable. They didn't want to have to navigate a more nuanced world and have to accept that there aren't clean categories of people anymore, and everybody's kind of different, and you have to adapt to complexity, is how I would say it. And it's very uncomfortable, especially just humans, to deal with complexity. You want things to be simple. You want things to be, right where you expect them to be. And so they spoke with their pockets. And so when we think about companies that historically benefited from DEI over the last, 5-10 years, back away from it as if they're backing away from their economic interests, they are not. They probably did some math and said the power of the purse of this one group is better or more impactful than the purchasing power of another group. And so they're making a calculated guess. If I'm going to aggravate one group today, which group is going to, is less likely to hurt my bottom line? And so if you are still invested in the mission of making this world really pleasant for everyone in it, because just because you don't talk about it, just because you don't have initiatives at your company, doesn't mean that women don't still work there. Doesn't mean veterans still don't work there. They still are there. You still have to interact with them. And you can make it welcoming. It doesn't have to be like this. And you do have power over your pocket.
Not only that, but I think that all the advances and progress made within organizations, they're not going to disappear because companies don't have policies anymore. I mean, things have happened and people are talking about what they need. And this is already happening, and I'm going to bring another controversial topic, but it's already happening with the going back to the office, right? Companies are having a hard time because people are saying, well, I experience what happened to me and my family and my well-being and my quality of life when I had the opportunity to work from home. So a lot of people are actually not staying in companies that are not offering the flexibility that they need. So I think that that might also happen with diversity initiatives. I mean, I'm not going to back off of the rights and the advancement that I had in this organization. So, we all have power. It might not be the power to influence government policy, at least for those of us that do not work at the government, but we do have power, and we always have to remember that.
Yeah.
I think you bring up an interesting idea of that power, and are we exercising it effectively? I'll switching gears just a little bit. As I've seen companies evaluate their policies and like, do I align with the administration? If you're relying on government funding, you almost have to, right? You have to strip all this language from your websites and from your employee handbooks and stuff. And I had somebody ask me, is there still a place for organizations like Empower Her To? Does Empower Her To
So
move
I don't think
forward? Is there a place for us in
I
a
don't think we
world
would be
that
kicked out.
if we
Funny
walked
enough,
into the
we've actually
door
never
trying to look
applied
for
for government
donors,
funding. So
would
it's
we be kicked
interesting
out?
enough that it doesn't really
And
impact us on that side, because
go
we
ahead,
have been
Janine.
sustainable. We've been able to have the right donors to still assist us, right? But as we grow, obviously, that might be where it's like, hey, do we need government funding? Would it be great to have? 100%. Do we need it? No, because we can still sustain the organization and do the things that we do. However, it's funny that you bring this up, because I had this conversation with someone a few days ago where they said, are you worried you're going to have to shut down your organization? I said, we still have women in the world, right? Women still have jobs. They still have businesses. So why would we shut it down? And that was really the answer that I gave this person, because I said, yes, DEI, 100%, this is going to impact us. I don't think for Empower Her To itself, it's going to impact us as much as we think, as long as we partner with the right people. So we're still going to get a no here and there, because we got no's before all of this happened, right? So we're still going to get the no's, but those aren't the people that we even want to work with these girls. Those aren't the people that we want to stand behind and say, this is our partner, if that's how they feel. And for me, going back to, I think it was Carla that had mentioned her dad, like, growing up, my dad said, you have to be independent. You have to make sure you're successful. You have to do all these things. And in my mind, I said I had to do all these things because I know, just like Sheetal said, it would be a little bit harder when I walk in a room, right? Because someone looks at me and says, not only is it that she's a Black woman, not only is it that, she's educated, it's that I look younger than I am. I look younger than I am, right? So it's kind of like, oh, well, we're not going to take her serious. So this is why, even with having all this funding, disabled or dismantled or thinking about dismantling, it doesn't affect us.
I think that's a powerful statement, Carla.
Yeah, when you ask about how this is going to change or if we're not going to get funding, I think our core mission has to remain unchanged. Well, I don't think. I know our core mission has to remain unchanged, because empowering these young women, particularly for Latina and Black communities, which is what we are fostering in our organization, is to continue to break those cycles of violence and build economic independence, just like Janine was saying. That's so important. But if the programs from organizations are being cut out for this diversity and inclusion, it's an imperative for us to then give them those tools to navigate this new world. And maybe our language or approach eventually will have to evolve a little bit to navigate this discourse. We continue to have to build those skills and mentorship and advocacy programs, because now they're critical, because we become part of that allyship and that that group that continues to support them throughout. So we will continue to emphasize our mission and our leadership development. And we're going to have to align to these shifting priorities in the corporate and the philanthropic giving. But I think the core mission will have to stay where it is, and has become even more important now, because with all the changes that are going on, we have to be there to support the girls.
speaking of the girls, and we're on the front lines of this, they hear what's going on in their schools, they hear what's going on
So the
in the
younger girls,
world.
from what I know,
They're
what one of our program
probably even more
managers did tell me is
connected
that
to this
a lot of
than
them
we
don't really
are.
understand, right? And it comes from the
What are they
perspective of,
saying?
because again, we cater to the
What are
unserved community,
young
right?
girls saying?
They sometimes don't have those tools to really understand the political agenda, to understand what's going on politically, what's going on behind the scenes, corporations and things like that. So for them, a lot of the responses getting is, oh, these people are racist. But that's not necessarily what it is, right? But that's literally what they're saying, because they don't know. So I remember that Katrina, had mentioned to me that she kind of had to break it down to them. And that at the same time brought a thought to me that maybe that's something we need to incorporate in one of our programs, is breaking down, what does this actually mean for you guys? Because you guys are going to be the front line of this, right? So what does this actually mean for you? Because a lot of them, they don't understand. The older girls, the ones like 19, 20, yeah, they totally understand. These ones are so confused because their parents are going frantic. Parents are quitting, parents are getting fired, but they don't know what's going on. They just know that something's happening in their home, right? And then for the older girls, it's kind of like, well, in their words, I got to get money, right? Because to them, they're like, well, I can only be as powerful if I have all this money. So I think most of them don't really understand what's happening right now. And I really think that's something that we also have to think about, is maybe this is the time we have to talk about, what does DEI mean at these ages? Because even for me, I didn't really understand it until I was like probably in my late 20s. I just heard it going around. People were talking about it. It wasn't DEI, it was D&I, as Martha had mentioned, right? And it took me having something impact me to really start looking into it, to be like, oh, this is what it is, right? So this is where I'm going to pose the question, that is this something that we want to implement and talk to these girls about, so that they're not surprised when the 22-year-old goes and tries to get a job and she's confused as to what's going on, right? So this might be something that we want to incorporate in one of our programs.
Yeah, I agree with that. From what I've heard from, not necessarily from the girls in the program, but from the Gen Z that is entering the workforce, is that they're aware that the shifting landscape, the opportunities in education, internship, and the jobs that are out there. But I think there's also this concern that this representation, or lack thereof, is going to be removed, and that makes them discouraged. I will imagine that the girls in our program are seeing similar things, because it's all over the news, because it's, everybody's talking about it. But I think this strength that we give them in this community, that support that we give them, and the networks, has to reinforce that confidence, and support their aspirations. So I do agree that probably a conversation to begin with them, and giving them the forum to express what are some of these challenges that they foresee, or where they think they might need help, will be fundamental. Because I think it's a great time to listen, and not so much talk. Let's listen to what is the sentiment out there. So in return, we can develop either stronger programs, addition to programs, or additional supporting mechanisms.
Yeah. And Carla, I know for a fact that this is happening today in many of the ESGs, in many organizations. People are getting together and saying, okay, this is the new playground. What can we do? What are the things that we need to ensure that we keep on? And then what are the changes that we need to make in our policies and the way we speak about things? And at the same time, what are the concepts that we need to ensure we keep within our organization? So these conversations are happening everywhere.
I wonder if they're coming to the same conclusions we are. One, that this mission is probably even more relevant than it ever was, even just a month ago, even 2 months ago. We're reaffirming our commitment to the mission, But talking to young girls, and this would be my message to the girls in our program or girls anywhere or anybody who wants something out of their life. Let's forget about girls. Let's forget about labels and forget about diversity. If you're a human being and you want something out of your life, the message I would say is regardless of what's going on politically, you can make something of yourself. You still can choose to educate yourself. You still can choose to find a skill and monetize it. You still can choose all of those things. There's still many things within your own control, and to not let what's going on around you discourage you. And if you hear no, it's something I tell myself often. I tell myself often when I hear no, okay, you're not my person. I'm going to go find somebody else or something else. I can go get it on my own. And that's powerful for our girls, but I think that's powerful for anybody in today's world thinking that they're powerless in a world that thinks that they can decide what you can and cannot have.
I love it. I would just suggest one small shift. It's not if I get a no, it's when I get a no.
Right.
Because it's going to happen. Whether you belong to any group, you are going to get no's before you get yeses. So when that happens, then the question is, am I in the right place? Is this the place I want to be in? Is this the person I want to have in my life, in my circle? So sometimes that's the question we have to ask, and we also have to assume that in order to be successful, we'll have to go through a couple of failures.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. And Janine asked a very poignant question. Yes, it should be part of the programming, and helping our girls navigate no, and helping our girls navigate failure, and to not, you're going to get discouraged, but how do you get back up and put one foot in front of the other? Carla, you were going to say something.
Yeah, and failure is an important lesson for anyone. Yeah, because failure is the first attempt in learning. So failure is not the end of the road. It's an opportunity to learn, whether it's something we could have changed or there is an opportunity to tackle things differently. Now, the most important thing in our programs is to reinforce that the value of the girls is not dictated by the external policies that are out there. It's by their skills, their resilience, and their ability to create impact. Because, like we talked earlier, it's about believing in yourself, it's about the story that you tell yourself, and it's helping them develop that narrative. And those, and also real life examples. I mean, it's not just us as part board members that can share our journey, but bringing other people into the conversation that can share how they navigated all the adversity that they found in their life, and how they build those careers or how they tackle those challenges, and equipping them with the tangible tools. I mean, we have very strong programs that are amazing that other organizations don't have or don't offer, but
And
these
you know
tangible
what's
tools that
even
we're
more
giving them is how we
interesting
get
is
them to
that I
succeed.
think we actually will get
So I
more
think,
partners
like I said, the
now
mission of the organization
because
is
of
more
what's happening,
powerful
because
and more
even more
critical than
mentors,
ever.
because there are going to be women, men, different people who are like,
And
hey, there's
yeah, go
even
ahead,
more of a
Janine.
reason to have your organization now because look what us as adults are currently dealing with in this climate.
Yeah, and it's not just lip service, and I would say, you know, Empower Her to benefits from not just women on its board, but there are men on our board. There are male mentors. There are male business owners who think about, absolutely, I want the broadest workforce I can pull from, who think that it's beneficial to them as owners, as leaders, as shareholders, that they don't want a small pool of talent. They want the biggest pool of talent that they can pull from. And that means giving everybody access to education and tools and training. And there's a lot of those like-minded leaders out there that go, okay, if this is the new world I live in, but I still have a business to run, I still have money to make, and I've benefited from these policies that I've had over the last 10, 15, 20 years that have created a dynamic workforce for me, well, I'm still committed to that.
Hmm.
No, nobody's going to take money out of my pocket. Like, I think they would look at the government and say, all right, maybe I don't put DEI on my website, but I'm still going to have the broadest, most diverse workforce because that's what's good. That's what's good for my business.
And I think that many organizations have already experienced that. They don't want to leave money on the table. So good practices and learnings and the richness of having diversity in our teams, and we can call it whatever you want, but this is about diversity of perspective, this is about diversity of thought, this is about innovation, creativity, and courage. So companies don't want to put that aside because it means leaving money on the table, and no company, profit or non-profit, is going to do that.
Right. And I would say, and I want to return to this to anybody who started in the middle of this or is just getting to this part of the conversation. When we're talking about these initiatives, again, it is not about taking someone who is untrained, who is uneducated, and giving them positions of leadership and power within organizations. When we're talking about our girls and the work that we do with girls age 14, 15, 16, all the way up to 21, 22, is giving them skills. When they walk in for the interview, they have the skill set necessary to be successful in the role that's being offered. They're not looking for a job because they are a woman. They're not looking for a job because they're a person of color. They're not looking for a job because they're from some historically disadvantaged minority group. They're looking for a job because they're damn good at what they do
Yeah.
and they believe it. And that's what we're talking about here. And so our mission is to continue to give these girls those skills and the confidence to believe in those skills.
Yeah, I would say we want to encourage a mindset shift from seeking that validation from systems to building their own paths.
Yeah. And I find that in professional settings, that validation from systems is very hard to come by. If you're looking for pats on the back, if you're looking for everyone to make you feel valued in the workforce, you're going to be looking for a very long time. It's very hard to come by. Not that it's impossible. I've benefited from really great companies that believe in that. But it's not everywhere and it's not most jobs. But it is a mindset shift that your validation doesn't come from outside you. Your validation comes from inside you. And I would even say that to people who are against DEI. If you're looking at your company and you're feeling unvalued, if you're feeling like they value your teammate more because of the way they look, then you need to do some work on you to validate you. You are valuable, and your enemy isn't your teammate. And that's what I would say to anybody is I've seen that time and time again. If you're looking outside yourself for a reason why you feel small, it's probably not the person you think of that's making you feel small. And so we're coming close to an hour, which, I love long-winded conversations. But is there anything now that you would love to, a parting message you would give to any one of our listeners, regardless of what they look like, regardless of why they came to this conversation, whether they hate us or love us, that you would want them to take away from the point of the conversation? What would be a good takeaway for our listeners here today? Carla, I'll start with you.
Me, all right. That the fight for equity is ongoing. Uh, any progress that we have as a society has never been linear. There are going to be setbacks, and everybody here is part of that journey. But also, that DEI is not about compliance or corporate policies. It is about creating those environments where everyone can thrive. That's the ideal, where everyone can thrive, regardless of how they look or where they came from. And lastly, that the listeners that are here with us can support others by mentoring, advocating, and ensuring that those opportunities remain accessible for the next generation. And I think particularly for us, as our role as women is to foster environments where other people can grow, where we can advocate for them in the workplace to help them continue and not necessarily, the worst thing that can happen is that you turn a blind eye to what's happening, but be part of the change. And I think the listeners here can be part of that change.
Martha, I'll go to you now.
I would say the fact that policies around DE&I are going away in some organizations and some environment doesn't mean that the behaviors that are bringing the benefits for everybody need to go away. So focus on yourself, focus on changing your mindset on the things you can do, and for anybody, right? And if you are, and be an ally, support others, create opportunities to continue um, promoting and having the behaviors that have brought the benefits to the organization, to the community, and to the world. So do your part.
I would say to my listeners, and for Martha and Carla, I had Janine is here. I'm gonna actually go to Janine first before I give my final thought. Janine, what would you want to tell our listeners?
First of all, I would say if you have a child within this age range in South Florida and you understand how pressing this matter is right now, have them join Empower Her too. That's number one. Again, if you are in the situation and this matter is pressing to you, you can become a mentor as well. You can become a partner. I think right now we need to collectively come together and just realize that, yes, it's impacting us, but it's also going to impact the people behind us, which are those girls, because some of the older ones are going to be going into the workforce shortly, right? It's number two. And then number three is, if you really don't understand what's going on, do some research. You can even reach out to me, do some research, because it is very important for everybody to really understand what's happening and how disastrous this potentially is going to become, and that we all need to collectively come together at this point. That's what I have to say.
I'm so glad that Janine brought that up. My parting thoughts is, we're not going to live in fear. No organization that believes in the betterment of people, regardless of their, stratified mission, which groups of people that they focus on. We all want betterment for people. Should be afraid of what's going on around them. They should feel now is an opportunity to recommit themselves to the mission. If that's your mission of doing better for people, don't give up on that. Don't listen to the noise outside. Continue to do that. Part of why I have this wonderful group on this show today was that's my commitment. My mission over the next 20 years, my next chapter of my life is about building people up, building good people up. And there's a lot of great people worthy of building up. And we can leave the noise outside and go, okay, I can control what I can control. I see good people. I'm going to empower good people. And if you are someone who says, I want more humanity in my life, I want more humanity in my workplace, I want more humanity in my home and in my friend groups, then you're a lot like us. That's all we want too. And you do have power. You have power of your voice. You have power of your purse. You have more power than you realize. And I would hope that through listening to us, you realize that power. And yes, absolutely donate. Hopefully, I'm going to get a link up. Empower Her Too obviously needs funds to continue to impact women and girls. And by impacting women and girls, you are impacting the whole community. You're not just impacting one person, you're impacting every person that person touches. And so small dollars goes a really, 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 really long way. So please donate and please reach out to us if you want to learn more about how your organization can do more for your community, more for people, more for diversity, more for women and girls. Please reach out to any one of us. This is Carla, Martha, and Janine at Empower Her Too. We can talk to you and give you opportunities, even in this new paradigm where you might get backlash. How do you navigate it where you can still be yourself and still hire the best talent you have without fear of reprisal? We're not about fear at this organization. So thank you so much for listening. Thank you, Carla, Martha, Janine, and Empower Her Too for taking the time out today to talk to me and share their voice and their wisdom. And I hope I get to have them on the show again. This is Sheetal Weapon. I'm Lethal Sheetal. Thanks for listening, everybody. Thanks for hanging out with us today. If you love this episode, or if you at least didn't hate it, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss what's coming next. And hey, share it with your friends, share it with your family. Until next time, stay bold, stay real. Peace out. Deuces.